Tonight, we journey into the heart of Africa, into the whispers of the savannah as twilight falls, where the wind rustles through ancient baobabs, and the embers of distant fires flicker like stars. Here, beneath the vast canvas of an African night sky, the air still vibrates with echoes of the past, not just of kings and warriors, but of traditions, beliefs, and a way of life that shaped an entire nation. This is a tale woven not from myth, but from the very fabric of history. A story of a people who carved their destiny from the harsh African landscape, who built empires with their bare hands, and who lived by a code as unyielding as the continent itself. They were the Zulu, forged in the crucible of conflict and unity, guided by the vision of leaders who saw strength in unity, and whose legacy still resonates across the land. Let us pause for a moment. The night air carries the faint scent of wild sage. Over the next 2 hours, we will walk in the footsteps of these remarkable people. Feel the earth beneath our feet, the weight of tradition on our shoulders, the prudent responsibilities in our hearts. We'll journey through 4 chapters of their story, the daily rhythms of Zulu life where every action, from tending cattle to crafting beadwork, was imbued with deep cultural significance. Then, we'll witness the rise of the Zulu kingdom, not as a sudden explosion of power but as a gradual coalescence of clans, guided by visionary leaders. Later, we'll explore the intricate social structure of Zulu society, where age grades, initiation rites, and a complex system of beliefs shaped every aspect of life. And finally, we'll step into the royal courts of the Zulu kings where ancestral spirits whispered counsel, where alliances were forged and broken, and where the fate of an entire people hung in the balance. Let your mind wander across the rolling hills. Let your thoughts drift with the smoke of 100 cooking fires, and imagine, if you can, what it truly meant to be born Zulu in the time before empires collided. In the cool embrace of the African night, we begin our journey. The land stretches out before us, a tapestry of grasslands and thornveld, of hidden valleys and mist-shrouded mountains. This is KwaZulu, place of the Zulu people. But to understand the Zulu, we must first understand the land that shaped them. A land of contrasts where lush river valleys give way to arid plains, where summer storms bring both life-giving rain and devastating floods. It was here, in this crucible of nature, that the Zulu forged their identity, not as conquerors of the land, but as its children intimately connected to every hill, every stream, every living creature. As the first light of dawn breaks over the eastern horizon, we see a Zulu homestead stirring to life. Smoke rises from cooking fires, and the lowing of cattle fills the air. Men emerge from their huts, spears in hand, ready to tend to their herds, the living wealth of their people. Women, adorned with intricate beadwork that speaks volumes to those who know its language, begin their daily tasks, grinding maize, fetching water, tending to crops. Each action, a testament to the strength and resilience of Zulu women. Children play in the dust, their laughter a counterpoint to the rhythmic thud of wooden pestles in mortar. But even in their games, we see the seeds of future roles boys, mimicking the stance of warriors, girls practicing the intricate patterns of bead. As the sun climbs higher, we turn our gaze to the heart of the homestead the cattle crawl. Here, in this circular enclosure of thorny branches, lies the true wealth of the Zulu. Cattle are more than mere animals. They are a living connection to the ancestors, a measure of a man's worth, the foundation of Zulu society itself. We watch as a group of young men, their bodies gleaming with ochre, lead a prized bull from the kraal. Today is a day of celebration, a wedding, perhaps or the coming-of-age ceremony for a young warrior, the animal will be sacrificed, its spirit joining those of the ancestors, its meat shared among the community in a feast that will last well into the night. As the day progresses, we see the intricate web of Zulu society in action. Elders gather in the shade of a spreading acacia, their weathered faces etched with the wisdom of years. They speak in low tones, settling disputes, offering counsel, ensuring the smooth functioning of the community. Nearby, a group of young warriors practices with the short stabbing spears that would become synonymous with Zulu military might. Their movements are fluid, precise, honed by years of training and discipline. As the sun begins to set, casting long shadows across the land, we see the community gather once more. Tonight, there will be dancing, the thunderous rhythm of feet stamping the earth, the haunting melodies of ancient songs rising into the twilight. This, then, is the heartbeat of Zulu life, a rhythm as old as the land itself, a dance of tradition and adaptation, of individual and community, of the seen and the unseen. As night falls once more and the fires burn low, we pause to reflect. We have glimpsed but a fraction of the rich tapestry that is Zulu culture. Yet even in this brief moment, we have felt the pulse of a people proud, resilient, deeply connected to their land and their ancestors. Tomorrow, we will delve deeper into the story of the Zulu. But for now, let us rest beneath the star-studded African sky, our minds filled with images of a world, both familiar and utterly foreign, the world of the Zulu. There is no boot camp like a Zulu. The day began not with breakfast, but with running. At dawn, before the mist even cleared the hills, young warriors called Amakosi were already on their feet, running, always running. And not on soft earth. The barefoot run was a rite of fire, across thorn bushes, over stones, 4 kilometers at a time until the soles of your feet grew calloused and thick as rhino hide. You could cry, you could bleed, but you could not stop. Let's pause here for a moment. The sky begins to pale. The first winds of day stir the dust. There were no sandals. Shaka forbade them. He believed pain forged discipline, and that a warrior who feared a thorn would surely fear a spear. So they ran, and when they stopped, they formed a circle not to rest, but to fight, stick fighting, chest out, chin up, eyes steady. Your opponent was not your enemy. He was your brother, and yet if you lost, you felt shame. If you won, you felt bruises. The goal was not to win, but to be better, faster, harder, more enduring. Then came the drills. Shield up, advance, drop, pivot, strike, repeat. 4 hours. They trained until their arms burned and lungs felt hollow, until sweat rolled into their eyes and their limbs shook, but still they moved. Because in the Zulu military, fatigue was not an excuse. It was expected. Let's rest a moment. The sun has risen. Shadows grow short beneath the trees. Water was rationed. Meals were rare, and luxury, if it came at all, was a bowl of fermented amasi or a mouthful of roasted meat. There were no tents, no soft bedding. At night, they lay on woven mats or bare earth, huddled together for warmth beneath an open sky. You were not allowed to marry until your regiment was disbanded. Sometimes after decades, desire was the enemy of loyalty. A warrior belonged to his king before he belonged to anyone else. Punishments were swift. A warrior who disobeyed, who fled battle or shirked training, could be executed in front of his brothers. Not for cruelty, but for example, to remind the others. The Zulu army was not a place for boys. It was a crucible for men. And yet, They loved it because within the hardship there was pride. Within the discipline there was identity. To wear the headring of an Ibetho, a full warrior, was to walk taller than any chief's son. Let's pause here once more. The fire crackles softly, and we rest beneath the stars. The life of a Zulu warrior was not for the faint of heart. It was a path of relentless challenge, unwavering dedication, and unyielding strength. From the moment they joined the ranks, these young men were thrust into a world where comfort was a distant memory and pain became a constant companion. Dawn broke over the rolling hills of KwaZulu-Natal, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold. But for the Amakosi, there was no time to admire the beauty. Their day began with the pounding of feet against the earth, a rhythm as old as the Zulu nation itself. The morning run was more than just exercise. It was a test of will, a forging of spirit. Barefoot, they traversed landscapes that would make even the hardiest traveler wince. Sharp stones cut into tender flesh, thorns pierced skin, yet they pressed on, kilometer after kilometer, until their feet became as tough as the land they defended. Shaka Zulu, the visionary king who transformed the Zulu into a formidable military force, understood the power of discomfort. He saw softness as weakness, and so he banned sandals. In his eyes, a warrior who flinched at a thorn would hesitate before a spear. Pain was not the enemy, it was the teacher. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the savannah, the warriors gathered, but not to rest. No, their circle was one of combat. Wooden sticks clashed, a staccato rhythm punctuated by grunts of effort and cries of triumph or defeat. In these mock battles, brothers became opponents. Friends became rivals. Each blow was a lesson, each bruise a badge of honor. Victory brought no lasting glory, only the knowledge that tomorrow would bring another fight, another chance to prove oneself. The stick fights were more than mere sport. They honed reflexes, built strength, and forged bonds stronger than blood. In the heat of battle, when spears flew and shields clashed, it would be these brothers-in-arms who stood beside you, who bled with you, who died for you if necessary. As the day wore on, the real work began. Drills, endless and unforgiving, dominated the afternoon. Shield walls formed and broke like waves upon a shore. Spears thrust forward in perfect unison. A forest of deadly points advancing and retreating with practiced precision. Hours passed, marked only by the changing angle of the sun and the growing ache in muscles pushed beyond their limits. Sweat poured, stinging eyes and slicking palms, lungs burned, desperate for air in the dusty heat. Yet still they moved, driven by a discipline as unyielding as iron. In the Zulu military, exhaustion was not an excuse. It was the norm. To falter was to fail, not just yourself, but your brothers, your king, your entire people. And failure was not an option. As twilight approached, bringing with it the promise of cooler air, the warriors finally rested. But even this respite was Spartan. Water, precious in the African heat, was carefully wrapped. Meals, when they came, were simple fare, perhaps some amasi, the fermented milk beloved by the Zulu, or a handful of roasted mealies, the corn that sustained the nation. Night brought little comfort. There were no soft beds awaiting tired bodies, no warm hearths to gather around. Instead, the warriors huddled together on the bare earth or simple woven mats, finding warmth in the press of bodies and comfort in the shared experience of hardship. For many, this life of constant training and deprivation lasted years, even decades. Marriage and the comforts of family life were distant dreams, allowed only when a warrior's service was complete. The Zulu understood that divided loyalties could weaken resolve, and so they demanded total dedication. This singular focus extended to every aspect of a warrior's life. Disobedience was met with swift and often fatal punishment. A warrior who fled from battle or shirked his duties might find himself executed before his comrades, not out of cruelty, but as a stark reminder of the cost of weakness. Yet for all its harshness, the life of a Zulu warrior was not without its rewards. There was a deep pride in belonging to something greater than oneself, in being part of a fighting force renowned throughout Africa. The headring of a full Ibutho warrior was a mark of distinction that commanded respect from commoners and nobility alike. As we sit here by the fire, its flames casting flickering shadows, and its warmth a rare comfort, we can almost hear the distant echoes of those long ago warriors. Their legacy lives on in the proud traditions of the Zulu people, in the stories passed down through generations. The Zulu military system under Shaka was more than just a fighting force. It was a crucible that forged men of incredible strength, both physical and mental. It demanded everything from its warriors: their youth, their comfort, sometimes their lives, but in return, it gave them purpose, identity, and a place in history. As the stars wheel overhead and the fire burns low, we're left to ponder the incredible resilience of the human spirit. The Zulu warriors endured hardships that would break most modern soldiers, and they did it without the advanced equipment or medical care we take for granted today. Their story is a testament to what humans can achieve when pushed to their limits, when driven by a cause greater than themselves. It's a reminder that true strength comes not from comfort, but from overcoming adversity. As we drift off to sleep lulled by the night sounds of the African bush, we can't help but feel a mix of awe and gratitude. Awe at the incredible toughness of those long ago warriors, and gratitude that we live in gentler times. Yet perhaps there is also a small part of us that wonders, in our world of comfort and convenience, have we lost something vital? The Zulu warriors knew who they were and what they stood for. Can we say the same? These are questions to ponder as the new day dawns, bringing with it new challenges and opportunities. For now, let us rest and dream of a time when men ran barefoot across thorns and forged themselves into legends. Hunger was your drill master. It wasn't just the body that was tested in a Zulu military camp, it was the stomach, the soul, the ability to endure not only the sting of a spear, but the slow, gnawing ache of hunger. Morning came without breakfast, only movement, only training, and perhaps, if the king's stores allowed a handful of boiled umgichasomies mixed with beans served in silence. Let's pause here for a moment. The light shifts softly through the branches above, and our ears catch only the sound of wind in grass. The Zulu warrior diet was a lesson in simplicity and sometimes in suffering. There was no feasting in the barracks, no plates piled high with meat or sweets, only survival, sour milk, dried maize, occasional strips of salted game. If the regiment had hunted well, these were the staples that fueled the fierce Zulu warriors, renowned for their strength and endurance. Water was drawn from rivers, or rationed in gourd vessels when the regiment was on the move. There were no flasks, no fireside kettles. If the water was muddy, drank it muddy, because thirst was as constant as the sun, and to complain about it was to be reminded that your ancestors had endured worse. Discipline extended even to how you ate. You did not snatch food. You did not chew loudly. You did not speak while eating. Meals were sacred because they were rare, and the camp had eyes. Elders watched for greed. Officers watched for weakness. and your brothers watched to see if you could be trusted when your belly was empty and your pride was full. Let's pause here for a moment. The coals glow faint beneath the ash, and the night hums low with memory. Some warriors would fast for days, not for punishment, but for mental clarity, to numb the body, to heighten the senses, to remind the heart that survival comes not through indulgence, but restraint. They trained in this state, ran with hollow stomachs, fought with tired limbs, because war would not wait for you to be fed, and neither would Shaka. In moments of extreme hunger, some young men would chew grass, not for nutrition, but for comfort, a ritual older than words, to pretend the mouth was full while the belly remained empty. They sang through their hunger low, rhythmic chants, sometimes prayers, sometimes battle hymns, but always songs of endurance. Songs meant to push the pain deeper until it became fuel. Let's pause here for a moment. The stars wheel above, silent and eternal, as dust settles gently on the earth. When a feast did come, when a cow was slaughtered for a great victory or ritual, it was not chaos, it was order. Seniors first, elders next, then the rest, row by row. No grabbing, no hoarding, just reverence. The meat was often unseasoned, but no one complained, because meat, even in its simplest form, was honor. And after such a feast, the warriors would dance, not wildly, but with power, precision, feet stomping in unison, shields raised, voices united in the deep hum of praise. Let's rest now. The fire burns low, and the first owl calls from beyond the trees. In the quiet of the night, the lessons of hunger lingered. It was more than deprivation, it was a forge, a crucible that shaped not just bodies, but spirits. The Zulu warrior knew that an empty stomach could fill the mind with clarity, that thirst could sharpen focus like the edge of a blade. That discomfort was not an enemy, but a teacher. Dawn would break, and with it, another day of training, of pushing limits, of transforming weakness into strength. But in these pre-dawn hours, as the camp stirred from uneasy sleep, there was a moment of reflection, of gratitude for the harsh wisdom of hunger, because hunger was more than an absence. It was a presence, a constant companion that whispered of the strength that comes from denying the body its comforts. The young warriors learned to embrace this teacher, to find power in the gnawing ache, to draw resolve from empty bowls and dry gourds. As the first light touched the eastern hills, they rose, not defeated by hunger, but empowered by it, ready to face another day of grueling training, of pushing beyond what they thought possible. They moved as one, a sea of lean muscle and quiet determination. No complaints, no hesitation, only the steady rhythm of feet on dusty ground and the soft clinking of spears against shields. The day's training would be brutal, running 4 miles across unforgiving terrain, mock battles fought with real weapons and real risk, drills that pushed the body to its limits and then demanded more. But they were ready because hunger had prepared them, had stripped away weakness and hesitation, had left only the core of what it meant to be a warrior. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the training grounds, the warriors moved with a grace that belied their empty stomachs. Each movement precise, each strike purposeful. There was beauty in this discipline, in the way hunger had honed their bodies and sharpened their minds, in the quiet strength that came from knowing you could endure when others would falter. Let's pause here for a moment. The heat shimmers on the horizon, and the air is thick with the scent of sun-baked earth and sweat. Midday came, and with it, a brief respite. Not for rest, but for reflection. The warriors gathered in the shade of ancient trees, their bodies still, their minds active. They spoke in low voices of battles past and future, of the legends that had come before them, of the honor it was to serve, to protect, to fight for their people. And always, the conversation returned to food. Not in complaint, but in reverence. They spoke of the feasts of their childhood, of the meals that would come after victory, of the simple joy of a full belly. But these were not longings. They were reminders of what they fought for, of the abundance that existed beyond the harsh training grounds, of the life they were sworn to protect. As the afternoon wore on, the training intensified, bodies pushed to breaking points, minds tested beyond endurance. But still, they persevered, because hunger was their ally now. It had taught them that discomfort was temporary, that pain could be overcome, that the mind could triumph over the body's demands. Let's pause here for a moment. The wind picks up, carrying with it the distant sound of cattle lowing and the faint echo of village life beyond the camp. As evening approached, the warriors gathered once more, not for a feast, but for a simple meal. Porridge, perhaps, or a handful of dried meat, eaten slowly, mindfully, with gratitude. They savored each bite, not for its flavor, but for its purpose. This was fuel. This was strength. This was the nourishment that would carry them through another night and into another day of training. And as they ate, they remembered the stories of their ancestors, the battles that had shaped their nation, the sacrifices that had been made so that they could stand here now as defenders of their people. Night fell, and with it came a different kind of hunger, a hunger for knowledge, for wisdom, for the stories and lessons that would shape them into not just warriors, but leaders. Around small fires, elders spoke of strategy, of honor, of the weight of responsibility that came with wielding a spear and shield. The young warriors listened, their eyes reflecting the flickering flames, absorbing every word, every lesson, storing them away like precious food for the battles to come. And as the night deepened, as the fires burned low and the stars wheeled overhead, a sense of peace settled over the camp, a quiet pride in what they had endured, in what they had become. For they were more than just warriors now. They were the embodiment of resilience, of discipline, of the indomitable spirit that hunger had forged within them. Let's rest now. The fire burns low, and the first owl calls from beyond the trees. In the stillness of the night, the Zulu warriors slept. Not the deep sleep of the well-fed and comfortable, but the alert rest of those who know that dawn brings new challenges. And in their dreams, perhaps, they saw not feasts or comfort, but victory, honor, the strength that comes from embracing hardship and emerging stronger. For hunger was their teacher, their guide on the path to becoming not just warriors, but legends. And as the first light of a new day touched the eastern sky, they would rise, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that they had been tested by hunger and found worthy. In the heart of the Zulu kingdom, a boy's life changed forever. The moment he was chosen, his past dissolved like mist. No longer a child of his village, no longer a tender of goats, no longer his own. He became proper Tiflish, spirit and essence of the great Nkosi. Dawn broke with rigid order. Before light kissed the savannah, warriors stood with bare feet on dew-kissed grass, aligned like living fortifications, a wall of human strength rising from African soil. Silence reigned, not by decree but because speech had become superfluous. The barracks were more than shelter. They were hallowed grounds round, crafted from grass and stick, arranged in circles like the protective embrace of long-gone ancestors. At their core, the prized herd, more than beasts living symbols of prosperity, power, and vitality, and close by, the eternal flames, never extinguished. For a hearth without fire spelled doom, ill omen no warrior dared invite. Let us pause and breathe. The flames whisper, and above, stars keep their vigil. Each unit was a family forged in fire, an Ibutho, not bound by blood, but by shared seasons and trials. You battled as one, bled as one, broke bread as one, and when rules were broken, you bore the consequences as one. This was the Nkozi's wisdom, for in his eyes, true allegiance sprouted not from affection but from shared adversity. Privacy was a forgotten luxury. Solitude, non-existent. Only the open air of the barracks remained. Only the watchful gaze of your brothers. Ever present, young warriors learned to sprint across thorny paths and sharp stones until their souls turned obsidian hard. They were taught to move in intricate patterns for hours under the scrutiny of elders, not for joy, but they were instructed to speak sparingly, to strike only when commanded. Displays of feeling were seen as flaws. Tears were luxuries left to infants. Even in death, stoicism prevailed. Let us pause once more. Night deepens its embrace, and far off, a drum's heartbeat echoes through the acacia. Yet even in this world of silence, bonds formed, a gentle clasp of an arm, a respectful nod after combat, a warning glance before punishment fell. These were the unspoken dialects of the Abu. And then came the trials. Mock skirmishes at daybreak, drills under the merciless sun, patrols in utter darkness, where a single misstep could earn the sting of the whip, or worse, the burn of disgrace. To be shamed before your Ibutho was to be to feel the weight of countless silent stares as your pride smouldered like embers in your chest. But for those who persevered, for those who obeyed without question, ... For those whose spirits became as unyielding as iron and as elusive as shadow, a moment of recognition awaited. A leader would give the slightest nod. A band woven from the hair of sacred cattle would encircle your wrist, and you would be acknowledged as a true warrior of the Zulu. No fanfare, no proclamation, just that simple bracelet, and the knowledge that your very breath now belonged to the ink. Let us rest here. The fire burns steady, and moonlight bathes the kraal in silver . In this world of discipline and duty, even the simplest gestures held profound meaning. The way a spear was held, the tilt of a shield. Each movement was a language unto itself. You learned to read the land like a living text. The bend of grass, the flight of birds, the taste of the wind all spoke volumes to those trained to listen. Hunger became a constant companion, not from lack, but by design. For a warrior with a full belly, they said, was a warrior unprepared for the lean times of war. Your body changed. Muscles hardened beneath sun-darkened skin. Scars, both seen and unseen, became badges of honor. Each told a story of survival, of lessons learned in blood and sweat. The elders spoke of ancestors watching from beyond, of spirits that danced in the flames of the eternal fires. You learnt to feel their presence, to draw strength from the whispers of those who came before. In rare moments of peace, stories were shared, tales of great battles, of heroes long past. These weren't mere entertainment. They were lessons, strategies, warnings wrapped in legend. You learned the art of the Iklava, the short-stabbing spear that had revolutionized warfare. Its weight became an extension of your arm, its point a deadly promise. The shield, too, was more than mere protection. It was a canvas of identity, its patterns telling the story of your regiment, your victories, your place in the grand design of the Nkozi's army. Time lost meaning, days blurred into seasons, seasons into years. You measured life not by the passage of moons, but by campaigns, by the growth of your skills, by the tightening bonds of your ebu. And always there was the cattle. Their lowing became the heartbeat of the kraal. You learned to read their moods, to tend their needs, for in times of peace, a warrior was also a herder, a guardian of the kingdom's wealth. Rituals marked the passage of time, the first kill in battle, the earning of your head ring, each milestone etched deeper into your identity as a warrior of the Zulu. You learned to move as one with your brothers, in battle formations that flowed like water, enveloping the enemy. The famous horns of the bull tactic became second nature, your body instinctively knowing its place in the greater whole. The world beyond the kraal became a distant memory. Villages, families, childhood, games all faded like mirages in the heat of your new reality, yet in quiet moments, when the night was deep and the fires burned low, you might catch a brother staring into the flames, a flicker of something homes. But such moments passed quickly, pushed aside by the weight of duty and the bonds of brotherhood. Your dreams became filled with the thunder of feet on dusty ground, the clash of shields, the war cries that made the very earth tremble. Even in sleep, you were a warrior, and through it all, the presence of the Nkosi loomed large, though you might rarely see him. His will shaped every aspect of your existence. His name was invoked in every order, every punishment, every victory. You were no longer just a man. You were a weapon, honed and deadly, a living embodiment of the Nkosi's power, a guardian of a way of life that had endured for generations. This was your world now. A world of spears and shields, of blood and honor. A world where your very breath belonged not to you, but to the great Nkosi of the Zulu. Let us end here. The fire dims, the stars wheel overhead, and in the distance, a new day begins to dawn on the kraal of warriors. Before the spears, before the legions, before the fear his name inspired across rivers and kingdoms, Shaka was a boy, unwanted, mocked, hardened by rejection, born to Nandi, a woman of pride and defiance, and Sinzanga Kona, a Zulu chief. Shaka entered the world already marked by controversy. His parents were not properly wed, his birth considered shameful by the customs of the time. And so the boy and his mother were cast out, exiled, disregarded. They wandered from kraal to kraal, from dry grasslands to thorny scrub, and the world was unkind. As a boy among strangers, Shaka learned to fight, not with weapons but with silence, with pride, within. He killed his first lion alone at 30. He once ran for 2 days without stopping to deliver a message across enemy land. He grew tall, muscular, and quiet with eyes that watched everything. Those who mocked him as a child now stepped aside when he passed. Let's pause here for a moment. The wind picks up through the long grass, whispering tales of the boy no one wanted. Shaka's life turned when he joined the Mithethwa Peoplender chief Dingiswayo, man of vision and patience. Dingiswayo saw potential in the silent youth. He gave him command over a small Hibuthoa group of young warriors, and Shaka transformed them. Gone were the loose formations of battle, gone were the distant throwing spear. He gave them shorter stabbing Spiziklua, named for the sound it medias. It pierced a man's body. He taught them to fight close, to move like water and strike like flame, but he taught them something deeper, too. A new way of thinking, discipline as worship, obedience as legacy. Under Shaka, warriors became more than soldiers. They became instruments of transformation. And the Zulu people, once scattered and modest in number, became a force feared across the continent. Let's pause here. A log collapses in the fire pit, and the night deepens with its glow. When Dingaswayo was killed by an enemy chief, Shaka seized the moment. He took the reins of the Mtetwa coalition, then turned inward and claimed the Zulu crown. Some say he did so with blood, others with strategy, but what followed was undeniable. He absorbed neighboring clans, not just by conquests, but by culture. He offered peace to those who submitted, and death to those who didn't. In just a few years, the Zulu kingdom grew from a whisper on the hillstone, a thunder across the plains. But Shaka's brilliance came with a shadow. His mother, Nandi, his fiercest supporter, died, and something inside him changed. He declared a national mourning period. No crops were to be planted, no milk was to be drunk. Pregnant women were put to death. Even cows that birthed calves were slaughtered so that no joy would share the season of grief. The man who rose from rejection had become a ruler who could not be denied. Let's pause here for a moment. The flames flicker lower now, casting long shadows on the warrior king's face. Shaka's reign was marked by innovation and terror. He revolutionized warfare, but at a cost that stained the earth red. His armies swept across the land, absorbing or destroying all in their path. The Mafekan the Great scattering began as tribes fled before the Zulu onslaught. Yet within this chaos, Shaka forged a nation. He standardized language, created a common identity, and instilled a fierce pride in being Zulu. The boy once mocked for his illegitimacy stood as the father of a people. But power breeds paranoia, and Shaka's grip tightened. He saw conspiracies in every shadow, traitors in every whisper. His own brothers, Dingan and Mailangina, watched and waited. They saw a king consumed by grief and rage, a man whose vision had twisted into madness. And so, on a September day in 1828, they struck. Shaka fell, not on the battlefield he had mastered, but by the hands of those closest to him. Let's pause once more. The embers glow faintly now, like memories fading into legend. What are we to make of Shaka Zulu, a boy forged in rejection, who built an empire on spears and loyalty, a visionary who united a people, yet drowned compassion in blood, a king who reshaped a continent, but could not escape the wounds of his past? Perhaps he was all of these things, and more. For legends are never simple, and greatness often walks hand in hand with terror. The Zulu nation he built would endure, facing new challenges in the centuries to come. But that is a story for another fire, another night. As dawn breaks over the hills of KwaZulu-Natal, we remember the boy who became a king, the outcast who forged a legacy, Shaka Zulu. Born in ashes, forged in fire, a name that still echoes across time, whispering of glory and ruin, of triumph and tragedy. The sun rises, the grasslands stir, and somewhere in the mist-shrouded valleys, the spirit of a warrior king still watches over his people. As Shaka's empire swelled across the green ridges of KwaZulu-Natal, his name began to carry more than power. It carried silence. It carried trembling. It carried the hush of thousands, waiting for his will to fall like thunder. He walked alone through his royal crawl, tall, barefoot. The only adornments were war necklaces made of leopard claws and beads from conquered tribes. When he spoke, no one interrupted. When he wept, no one dared breathe. The air around him seemed to crackle with an unseen energy, a force that bent the will of men and shaped the destiny of nations. Warriors lined the perimeter, their eyes cast downward, bodies taut with a mixture of reverence and fear. He built no palace of gold, no towers of marble. His kingdom was made of flesh and fear, of warriors sleeping on shields, of mothers teaching sons to kneel at his name. The very earth seemed to tremble beneath his feet, as if acknowledging the weight of his presence. Each day began before sunrise. When Shaka stood on the hill alone, watching the land like a hawk over cat, his gaze swept across the rolling hills, taking in every detail, every movement in those quiet moments. He was both sovereign and sentinel, the embodiment of a nation's strength and its relentless vigilance. He watched everything, measured everything, the rhythm of his people's lives, the ebb and flow of cattle herds, the whispers of potential threats carried on the wind. Nothing escaped his notice. No detail too small to warrant his attention. And when he saw weakness, even in the eyes of his own generals, he extinguished it. A flicker of doubt, a moment of hesitation, these were luxuries his empire could not afford. With a word or a gesture, he could elevate a warrior to greatness or condemn him to oblivion. Let's pause here for a moment. The night settles into the earth like a heavy blanket, and the silence carries the weight of his gaze. Shaka's brilliance was always tinged with cruelty. His mind, sharp as the edge of an assegai, crafted strategies that confounded his enemies and reshaped the art of warfare. But that same mind could turn inward, seeing threats where none existed, demanding perfection where humanity faltered. He demanded absolute loyalty and tested it. The air in his presence was thick with tension, every breath a potential misstep. Warriors who had faced death on countless battlefields found themselves trembling before their king. Knowing that their lives hung on his whim, he would summon a soldier, look him over, and ask, "Would you die for me today?" The question hung in the air, heavy as a storm cloud, pregnant with possibilities both glorious and terrible. In those moments, time seemed to stand still. The fate of empires balanced on the edge of a single word. The answer had to be yes, and sometimes he meant it literally. A hesitation, a flicker of doubt in the eyes, and the sentence would be passed. For Shaka, loyalty was not a matter of words, but of blood, a currency paid in full, without question or complaint. Disobedience, even hesitation, was punishable by death. And not only for the one who erred, but for his entire regiment. The weight of this responsibility pressed down on every warrior, binding them together in a brotherhood forged by fear and unwavering devotion. Fear was the mortar of his rule, but fear is a fragile thing. It can drive men to greatness, push them beyond the limits of what they thought possible, but it can also hollow them out, leaving behind shells that crumble at the slightest touch. After his mother's death, Shaka changed. The loss carved a void in him, a darkness that seemed to grow with each passing day. He became distant erratic. Some say he would speak to her spirit aloud, as though she were beside him, giving counsel in the moonlight. The once vibrant crawls fell silent, the joyous rhythms of life replaced by a somber. Shaka's grief became a living thing, a shadow that stretched across the land, touching every aspect of his people's lives. He banned celebrations. He grew suspicious of joy. No marriage was permitted during the mourning period. No feasts, no music, the laughter of children. Once a melody that filled the air became a whisper, quickly stifled, lest it draw the king's wrath. He began to see enemies everywhere, even in the eyes of kin. Paranoia crept into his decisions, poisoning the well of his wisdom. Those who had once stood closest to him now found themselves at arm's length, uncertain of their place in this new, darker realm. Let's pause here. A wind passes through the tall grass, and somewhere an owl calls softly into the dark. The kingdom began to strain. Food stores shrank as fields lay fallow, neglected in the wake of Shaka's decrees. Clans whispered behind their huts, voices low and eyes darting, fearing that even the walls had ears loyal to the king. Generals who once marched proudly now feared his shadow more than the enemy's. The fire of conquest that had driven them to greatness now smoldered, choked by the ashes of doubt and fear. In this silence, a seed of betrayal took root. His half-brothers Dingan and Mylangina watched closely, waited patiently. They saw what the people could not say aloud, that a king once revered had become a fire burning without wood, consuming all in his reach. In the gathering dusk, they would meet, voices hushed, eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of Shaka's spies. They spoke of the future of a kingdom restored to its former glory, free from the madness that now gripped their brother's heart. On a hot September afternoon in 1828, Shaka stood beside his cattle pens, watching the sun fall behind the distant hills. The air was heavy with the scent of dust and cattle. The familiar sounds of the kraal muted, as if in anticipation of what was to come. It was then that they struck. Dingan and Mylangina, along with their loyalist, drove their spears into the King's body again and again until his blood soaked the soil that he had once ruled without question. The act was swift, brutal, a mirror of the very strength Shaka had instilled in his warriors. There were no cries, no ceremony, only silence, a silence so deep it seemed the hills themselves held their breath. The great Shaka, the architect of an empire, the terror of his enemies, fell without a sound, his life ebbing away into the earth that had borne him. Let's pause here. The fire has gone low, and we sit now with the echoes of a fallen monarch. Shaka was buried secretly, his grave still lost to this day, hidden beneath earth and myth alike. Those who had feared him in life now whispered his name in death, unsure whether to curse his memory or honor the legacy he had carved into the heart of a nation. His reign was over, but his legacy ... had just begun. For from his ashes rose a kingdom whose warriors would go on to challenge even the world's greatest empire. The seeds of strength he had sown, watered with blood and nurtured by fear, would grow into a force that would shake the foundations of colonial ambition. And in the rhythm of marching feet, in the sharp cry of the Asiga, his spirit lingered. The tactics he had developed, the discipline he had instilled, became the bedrock upon which future generations would build their resistance against foreign invaders. Now we move toward the most famous echo of his teachings, a day when redcoats fell to spears. An empire bent its knee to Zulu strength. The legacy of Shaka, forged in fire and tempered by adversity, would prove to be a formidable weapon in the hands of those who came after him. The story of Shaka Zulu, the king who could not be touched, remains etched in the annals of history, a tale of brilliance and brutality, of vision and madness. It serves as a reminder of the power of a single individual to shape the destiny of nations, and of the complex legacy such power leaves behind. As the night deepens and the stars wheel overhead, we are left to ponder the nature of leadership, the price of greatness, and the enduring impact of a life lived on the razor's edge between glory and infamy. In the whisper of the wind through the grass, in the distant call of a night bird, the spirit of Shaka lives, Anna, testament to the indomitable spirit of a people and the indelible mark of a king who, even in death, could not truly be conquered. The morning of January 22nd, 1879, dawned with an unsettling stillness over the rugged terrain of Isa. The British encampment, a sea of white canvas tents and scarlet-clad officers, stood defiantly beneath the looming shadow of a lion-shaped hill. Soldiers laughed, sipped their morning tea, and meticulously inspected their rifles, their confidence buoyed by the weight of empire. But they remained blissfully unaware of what lurked beyond the distant ridges. They had arrived as conquerors, but they would depart in silence. The Zulu warriors, a formidable force of over 20,000 strong, had marched for days without rest, their bare feet gliding across the landscape like whispers on the wind. They carried no tents, wore no boots, and possessed no cannons. Their arsenal consisted solely of cowhide shields, short stabbing spears, and a spectral guidance of Shaka's enduring legacy. Their commander, Nchingwel Kamaholi, stood atop the Ngabini ravine, his gaze fixed upon the invaders with the unwavering resolve of ancient stone. Beside him, his men crouched low in the tall grass, their bodies taut with anticipation, awaiting the signal that would unleash the impending storm. Let us pause for a moment. The drums are silent, yet your heartbeat quickens. Sensing the approach of something momentous, the Zulu army advanced with eerie silence, adopting the formation of the buffalo horns, a lethal strategy conceived by the great Shaka himself. The flanks, or horns, would envelop the enemy in a deadly embrace. The center, the chest, would surge forward with overwhelming force, and the loins, a reserve force, would bide their time, poised to strike at the most opportune moment. The British, oblivious to the noose tightening around them, continued their drills with misplaced confidence. Their sentries caught glimpses of movement, but dismissed them as inconsequential. It was a fatal error. By midday, the horns had fully encircled the unsuspecting British forces, and then the very earth began to tremble beneath their feet. It was not merely a charge. It was a tidal wave of humanity, a dark tide of warriors advancing in perfect formation, their chants rising in unison, their footfalls pounding the earth in a rhythmic cadence that echoed the very heartbeat of Africa itself. The British opened fire, their volleys of bullets tearing through the first waves of Zulu warriors, but still they came undeterred by the hail of lead. Some Zulu fighters sprinted forward with spears already poised to strike. Others ducked and rolled beneath the deadly gunfire with serpentine grace. Many scooped up the weapons of their fallen comrades, pressing ever onward, and slowly, far too slowly, the British lines began to waver and crack under the relentless assault. Let us pause once more. The crackle of gunfire mingles with the mournful howl of the wind. The mountain stands as a silent sentinel, bearing witness to the unfolding drama. As ammunition stores dwindled rapidly, British officers shouted conflicting orders, their voices tinged with growing panic. Supply wagons were frustratingly out of reach. Crucial messages were delayed in the chaos. Reserve rifles jammed, rendered useless by the choking dust. And then, in a moment that would forever alter the course of history, the Zulu warriors breached the perimeter of the camp. The battle devolved into a brutal melee, a cacophony of clashing wood and steel, of gasping warriors and red-coated soldiers who had never imagined death could come at the point of a simple stabbing spear. The once pristine ground ran red with blood. The air grew thick with dust and the cries of the dying. Within a mere hour, the outcome was decided. Of the 1,800 British soldiers who had awakened that morning full of imperial pride, only a pitiful handful managed to escape the slaughter. The Battle of Isandlwana stands as the most devastating defeat ever inflicted upon British arms by an African military force. It shattered the long-held illusion of imperial invincibility in a single, bloody day. News of the catastrophe spread like wildfire across the globe. A native army, armed with little more than spears and shields, had utterly crushed a modern, well-equipped force armed with the latest rifles and tactics. The British would return, of course. Their ranks swelled with reinforcements, their artillery primed for vengeance, and their hearts burning with rage. They would raze villages to the ground, force leaders into exile, and carve the land into maps that paid no heed to ancient rivers or the living memory of its people. But for one glorious day, on the wind-swept slopes of Isandlwana, Africa stood tall and proud, while the mighty British Empire was brought to its knees. Let us pause here, allowing the weight of this moment to settle. A lone warrior's voice rises in a haunting melody, carried on the evening breeze. The tall grass sways gently, as if keeping time with the rhythm of this epic tale. we breathe deeply, inhaling the stillness that follows in the wake of the storm. From this pinnacle of triumph, we must now turn our gaze away from the blood-soaked battlefield and peer into the sacred halls of Zulu power, where true authority was not proclaimed with shouts, but whispered in shadowy corners. We now step into the realm of Zulu diviners, queens, and ancient rituals. A world where the threads of fate were woven by firelight and the casting of bones. The royal court of the Zulu kingdom was a place of intrigue and hidden power, where the whispers of advisors could shape the destiny of nations. At its heart stood the Izagadlo, the royal enclosure, a labyrinth of thatched huts and secret passages where only the most trusted could tread. Here, in the flickering light of sacred fires, the Azangoma, the diviners and healers, communed with the spirits of the ancestors. Their whispered prophecies and cryptic visions guided the hand of kings and the fate of entire peoples. The Izangoma were not mere fortune tellers, but the keepers of ancient wisdom and the bridge between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. Their power was feared and respected in equal measure, for they alone could interpret the will of the ancestors and the mysteries of the unseen world. Among the most revered of these spiritual advisors was the Isenyuzi, the royal diviner. This figure, shrouded in mystery and draped in the skins of wild animals, held the ear of the king and the power to influence the course of history. But the Isenyuzi did not work alone. The royal court was a tapestry of competing interests and hidden agendas, where queens and royal sisters wielded their own brand of subtle influence. The Amakosikazi, the royal women, were far more than mere ornaments in the king's household. They were shrewd politicians in their own right, their power stemming from their roles as mothers, sisters, and wives to the most powerful men in the kingdom. These women moved like shadows through the Izagadla, their soft footsteps belying the weight of their influence. They whispered in the ears of their sons, planted seeds of doubt or ambition in the minds of their brothers, and wove complex webs of alliance and rivalry that could topple dynasties or forge new ones. The most formidable among them was often the king's mother. Her word carried the weight of law, and her approval could make or break the aspirations of would-be successors to the throne. But power in the Zulu court was not limited to those of royal blood. The Izanduna, the councillors and military commanders, formed a vital link between the king and his people. These men, chosen for their wisdom, bravery, and loyalty, served as the eyes and ears of the monarch throughout the kingdom. In the great Ibandla, the royal council, the Izanduna debated matters of state and war, their voices rising and falling like the tide as they sought to sway the king's decision. Here, in this circle of power, the future of the Zulu nation was shaped through passionate argument and careful negotiation. Yet even in this arena of masculine authority, the influence of the royal women could be felt. A well-placed word from a favored sister, or a timely intervention by the Queen Mother, could tip the scales of debate and alter the course of history. As night fell over the royal kraal, the air grew thick with the smoke of sacred herbs and the rhythmic beating of drums. In the firelit darkness, the boundaries between the world of the living and the realm of the ancestors grew thin. It was in these shadowy hours that the most potent rituals were performed. Ceremonies of purification, divination, and communion with the spirits. The Izangoma would cast the bones, reading the patterns they formed with eyes that saw beyond the veil of mortality. The king himself would participate in these sacred rites, his body adorned with the symbols of his office, and his spirit open to the wisdom of those who had come before. For even the mightiest ruler was but a servant to the will of the ancestors and the traditions that had forged the Zulu people. As the first light of dawn broke over the eastern horizon, the night's mysteries would recede like mist before the sun. But the decisions made in those dark hours, guided by the whispers of diviners and the subtle machinations of royal women, would echo through the days and years to come. The power of the Zulu kingdom lay not just in the strength of its warriors or the skill of its generals, but in this intricate dance of ritual, politics, and spiritual authority. It was a world where the seen and unseen intertwined, where the voices of the dead guided the actions of the living, and where the fate of nations could turn on the interpretation of a dream or the fall of a bone. As we step back from this glimpse into the heart of Zulu power, we are left to wonder at the complexities of a civilization that Western eyes so often failed to comprehend. In the courts of Isandlwana and beyond, a rich tapestry of tradition and innovation, spirituality and wove together to create a society as sophisticated and nuanced as any in the world. The legacy of this hidden world of power and ritual would continue to shape the destiny of the Zulu people long after the echoes of battle had faded from the slopes of ice. It is a legacy that lives on to this day, in the whispered stories of elders and the beating hearts of those who still hear the voices of their ancestors on the wind. There is a world far removed from the battlefield, a world of polished floors and whispered songs, of incense coiling through woven grass walls, of horns sounded not for war, but for ceremony. This is the royal court of the Zulu kingdom, an inner sanctum where even generals bowed, and where truth was never spoken too loudly, for the ancestors always listened. Let us enter now, slowly, quietly, as if we too are barefoot in the king's kraal. The king, or Nkosi Nkulu, did not dwell among common soldiers. He lived on the high ground in the hill of nobility, surrounded by layers of advisors, wives, praise singers, and spiritual guardians. But power in this place was not shown with gold or garments. It was shown through order. Who entered the court first? Who sat where? Whose feet were allowed to touch the inner floor? Even the dust seemed to respect the silence of the place. And above all, there was the presence of the Izongoma the diviner. Let's pause here for a moment. The fire crackles softly, and we rest beneath the stars. The Izangoma was not merely she or sometimes he was the bridge between the living and the dead, chosen by ancestral spirits through dreams, illness, or sudden visions. The diviner walked barefoot between worlds. Inside the royal court, the diviner was consulted before any war, any marriage, any punishment. She spoke in chants, read the cracks in thrown bones, and washed her hands in river clay before every revelation. Some say the bones never lied. Others say it was not the bones, but the way her eyes seemed to glow in the dark when tensions ran high in the court, when whispers of betrayal stirred it. Was the diviner who was summoned. She would sit in silence, listening to the drums, her head tilted like someone remembering a dream. And then she would speak softly. There is a shadow where there should be none. A name is being spoken too often when backs are turned. And with that, a man would disappear by morning. The court carried out its justice as a whisper, not a shout. Let's pause again. The air thickens with incense. You hear only the breath of sleeping cattle outside. The king's wives also held power, not in the battlefield sense, but in the soft, unspoken way that shapes generations. Some were political marriages, alliances sealed with cattle and handshakes. Others were chosen for their dreams, or because their mothers were said to have spoken with spirits. The great wife, or Indalunkalu, sat closest to the royal hut. She was advisor, manager, and sometimes diplomat. She knew which generals were ambitious. She heard things said in passing, things that reached the king's ears only through her careful voice. And when the king died, it was the great wife who chose which son lived and which one did not. The royal court was not always gentle. Behind the slow rhythm of rituals, there lurked constant tension. A wrong word, a misplaced look, a forgotten custom under man could vanish without ceremony. But that is the way of sacred spaces. The more order they demand, the more they conceal. Let's pause here for a moment. The flames dance in silence. The moon peeks between clouds, and your breath moves slower now. From this sacred world of diviners and royal wives, we continue deeper still into the power beneath ritual. In the time before the great Shaka Zulu, when the Zulu were but one of many clans, the royal court was already a place of intrigue and power. But it was Shaka who elevated it to an art form. He understood that true power lay not just in spears and shields, but in the whispers that could turn friend to foe, in the rituals that could make a man believe he was invincible. Shaka's court was a place where every gesture held meaning. The way a man stood, the tone of his voice, even the beads he wore all spoke volumes. And at the center of it all stood Shaka himself, a figure both feared and revered. Let us step closer, as if we were honored guests in his presence. The air is thick with the scent of burning herbs. Praise singers chant softly, their words a constant reminder of the king's greatness. His lineage, his conquests. Shaka sits upon a raised platform, his eyes scanning the crowd. He does not wear the elaborate headdresses of later kings. His power is in his presence, in the way even the bravest warriors tremble slightly as they approach. But look closer, see how his hand rests lightly on the arm of a woman. This is not a wife, but his aunt, Maccabee. She is the Izangoma, the diviner, but she is so much more. In a world where men ruled with spears, Maccabee ruled with whispers and wisdom. It was she who helped Shaka rise to power. It was she who advised him in matters of state and war, and it was she who, some say, eventually orchestrated his downfall. Such was the quiet power that flowed through the royal court. Let's move now to the outskirts of the royal enclosure. Here, in smaller huts, live the Amabuthotha. They are the lifeblood of Shaka's army. But even here, in this place of strength and vigor, ritual and superstition hold sway. Before battle, they gather in circles, their bodies glistening with fat and ochre. The Ezengoma moves among them, touching each warrior's forehead, whispering words of power and protection. These men believe themselves invincible, not because of their strength or skill, but because of the rituals performed here in the quiet of the royal court. As night falls, the fires burn low, the chanting of the praise singers fades to a murmur, but the air remains charged with an unseen energy. This is when the real work of the court begins. In shadowy corners, advisors whisper of alliances and betrayals. In the king's private chambers, Maccabee speaks of visions and omens, and in the huts of the lesser wives, ambitions simmer and plots are hatched. For in the Zulu royal court, power is not just about strength. It's about knowledge, about secrets, about the ability to see what others cannot or will not see. Dawn breaks, and with it comes a new day of ceremony and ritual. The king emerges from his hut, his face impassive, but those who know how to look can see the weight of 1,000 whispers in his eyes. For this is the burden of the Zulu ruler, to stand at the center of a web of power and intrigue, to balance the seen and the unseen, the spoken and the unspoken. Let us step back now, out of the royal enclosure. The sun is high, and the world beyond continues its daily rhythms. But here, in the heart of the Zulu kingdom, time moves to a different beat. It is measured not in days or seasons, but in the ebb and flow of power, in the whispered words of diviners and wives, in the silent nods of advisors and generals. This is the true legacy of Shaka Zulu, not just the empire he built with spears and shields, but the intricate dance of power he choreographed within his court, a dance that would continue long after his death. shaping the destiny of the Zulu people for generations to come. As we leave this sacred space, remember the silence, the whispers, the unseen currents of power, for in the Zulu royal court, it was not always the loudest voice that held the most sway, but the one that knew when to speak, and more importantly, when to listen. The fire has burned low now. The stars wheel overhead, and in the distance, a lone voice begins to sing a praise song for kings long gone, for battles fought and won, for the enduring spirit of a people who understood that true power often lies in the spaces between words. Let the song carry you back to your own world, but keep a part of this place with you. For in understanding the quiet power of the Zulu royal court, we glimpse a truth about power itself, that it is often wielded most effectively with a shout, but with a whisper. In the royal courts of the Zulu kingdom, power was not complete without ritual. It was not enough to rule through soldiers or commands. The king had to rule through the ancestors, for it was believed that the living merely borrowed the land, while the dead truly owned it. Each season brought a ceremony, and each ceremony had its rules. In the first fruits festival, known as Umkosi, the king would taste the new harvest before any other mouth in the kingdom. But first, a bull was chosen not by strength alone, but by signs. If the bull trembled, it was rejected. If it charged toward the east when released, the diviner nodded slowly. A good omen. Only then would the ritual begin. Let's pause here for a moment. The flames flicker gently. You can almost hear the hooves in the distance. The chosen bull was not slaughtered with blades. It was strangled by hand, by the young warriors of the king's regiment, a show of unity, strength, and discipline. Their hands were painted in ochre, and their bodies coated with fat to glisten under the sun. As they wrestled the creature to the earth, chants rose like smoke, a deep-throated rhythm that echoed through the valley. Once the bull fell, its blood was smeared on the royal gate, and on the foreheads of the warriors. This act tied them to the ancestors, as if saying, "We have fed the earth. Now let the ancestors feed us in return." Later that evening, a sacred beer was brewed, not the kind poured at market stalls, but a thick fermented brew blessed by diviners, and stirred only by elder women. To drink it before the ritual was complete meant madness. To spill it was worse. In hushed tones, elders would say, "The ancestors are watching." And so people moved slowly. They knelt, they whispered, they poured with both hands. Let's pause again as the night deepens. The shadows are long, but gentle. The king sat above all, silent, still, and glowing in the light of the fire. His hair was braided tightly, his arms layered with ivory bangles, but his true power lay in stillness. He was the son of Senzangakona, descended from Jama, whose blood was said to run with the river Umfolose itself. Behind him, the royal praisinger recited his lineages in a song that never truly ended, for to stop singing would be to forget. And forgetting was the first step toward chaos. Before sunrise, the Izangoma would return, this time not to throw bones, but to dream. She would lie upon a red mat, covered in a goatskin cloak, and let the smoke of burning herbs carry her spirit. Some say she muttered names, others say her eyes opened, though she remained asleep. But by morning, she would speak. The ancestors had spoken, a name was chosen, a blessing was given, or a warning delivered. Let's pause here for a moment. The drums are silent now. You hear only the soft rustle of cattle shifting in their sleep. The power of Zulu ritual was not in spectacle, but in continuity. Each axolotl chant, dream tied the living to the dead, the present to the past. And so the royal court, did not rule with fear alone. It ruled with rhythm, with memory, with firelight and dust and dreams. In the next and final part of this segment 3.3, we'll enter the private, secret world of divine kingship, where the line between man and God grew thin, and where the king did not just speak for his people, but for the very soul of the land. The Zulu king was no ordinary man. He was not just a warrior or ruler. He was something more, something set apart. Among his people, he was Inkosi, but to the spirits, he was a vessel, a man whose every breath stirred echoes from the invisible realm. To be king was to carry more than a crown. It meant carrying the bones of all who came before. His sleep was not peaceful, for the ancestors visited him often. They did not knock, they did not wait. In dreams, they whispered warnings. In waking hours, their presence clung to his skin like dew. The king rose before the sun, not by choice, but because the night offered secrets the day could not hold. He would sometimes walk barefoot into the royal cattle kraal, pressing his palm to the horn of the oldest beast, and stand still listening. Let's pause here for a moment. The sky blushes with dawn, and silence holds everything like a soft blanket. His diviners, the Izangoma, were not advisors. They were his shadows. When he entered the court, they flanked him like sentinels, their anklets of twisted seed pods softly rustling with each step. These were not theatrical priests. They were feared, for they spoke in riddles. They danced in trance, and they dreamed on behalf of the kingdom. The king could not make war, move cattle, or take a new wife without first hearing their visions. Even in public, the king's body was sacred. No man could touch him without ritual. No woman could address him directly unless she bore a royal child. Even his saliva when spat to the earth was believed to hold power. It was common for soldiers to follow the dust from his footprints, not to clean it, but to keep it in small leather pouches worn around the neck as a charm against death. He could not eat common food. His meat had to be prepared in silence. His beer brewed only by the hands of virgins. Even joy had its limits. The king was not allowed to laugh without covering his mouth, for the sound of a king's laugh, it was said, could stir thunder. Let's pause here again. As the fire crackles low and the moon leans gently above the hills, some kings went mad under this weight. To be human while treated as divine was to live at the edge of loneliness. One king, it is whispered, spent his final days speaking only to the bones of his ancestors slayed neatly in carved gourds beside his bed. Another, fearing rebellion, hid a live serpent beneath his throne. Each time he grew uncertain, he would feed it milk from a royal spoon, believing the spirit of his father lived inside it. These were not tales of madness, but of sacred exhaustion. Yet even in their solitude, kings danced. During the Umkosi festival, when warriors formed a great circle and stamped the dust into rhythm, the king would rise. He would wear leopard tails trailing from his belt, his feet dusted with white ash, his arms painted with ochre, and his chest bare to the heavens. In that dance, he was not ruler nor spirit, but the bridge between both. Every stomp was a prayer, every turn was a spell, every breath pulled heaven and earth closer together. Let's pause one last time. Dear listener, the embers fade, but the story lingers. To understand Zulu kingship is not to study palaces or battles, but to grasp the silence between Richozu, the weight of being sacred, of speaking with the voice of the people and the ancestors both. And so we leave this sacred hill, the moon high, the wind still, the scent of ash clinging to the night. In segment 4, we'll descend into the royal courts not for ritual, but for power, where alliances were sealed with cattle, where queens vied for favor, and where decisions over life and death were whispered over horn cups of sorghum beer. The Zulu king's realm was not just of this world, but stretched into the unseen, where spirits danced and ancestors whispered. His every action rippled through both realms, each choice a stone cast into still waters, sending waves across the visible and invisible alike. The weight of the crown was more than gold and jewels, it was the weight of an entire people-esque destiny, balanced precariously on his shoulders. From the moment of his ascension, the king's life was no longer his own. He belonged to the land, to the spirits, to history itself. His body became a living shrine, every gesture imbued with meaning, every word a potential prophecy. The king's meals were not just sustenance, but sacred rituals in themselves. Each morsel was chosen with care, prepared with reverence, and consumed in silence. The royal beer, brewed by virgin hands, was more than a drink, it was liquid communion with the ancestors. Even in sleep, the king could find no true rest. His dreams were not his own, but visions sent by those who had come before. The ancestors spoke in riddles and symbols, their messages urgent but often unclear. It fell to the Azangoma to interpret, to translate the language of spirits into mortal words. These diviners were more than advisors, they were the king's link to the other world, their bones and beads a bridge between realms. When they cast their divining tools, the very fabric of reality seemed to tremble. The future unfolded in patterns of bone and stone, waiting to be read by those with the sight. The king's every decision was weighed not just in earthly consequences, but in spiritual repercussions that could echo for generations. To move cattle without consulting the spirit's score, to bring drought or disease, to wage war without divine sanction called doom, not just the living, but the unborn. The king's body was a vessel for power, both seen and unseen. His sweat, his breath, even the dust from his footsteps' soul were imbued with sacred energy. Warriors sought to capture this essence, carrying pouches of royal earth into battle, believing it would shield them from harm. But such power came at a cost. The king was set apart, elevated above his people, yet isolated by the very divinity ascribed to him. He could not share a meal with common folk, could not laugh freely or speak casually. Every word, every gesture was laden with meaning. Some kings found solace in ritual, losing themselves in the rhythms of sacred duty. Others sought comfort in the company of ancestors, surrounding themselves with relics and bones. Yet even in the depths of loneliness, there were moments of transcendence. During the great festivals, when the drums pounded and warriors danced, the king would join his people, adorned in the skins of leopards, his body painted with the colors of earth and sky. He would move to the ancient rhythms. In those moments, he was both more and less than a king. He was the living embodiment of his people's spirit, a bridge between past and future, heaven and earth. His dance was a prayer, a spell, a communion. Each step connected him to the land. Each gesture reached toward the spirits. For a brief time, the weight of the crown lifted, and the king could simply be a man moving in harmony with the cosmos. But such moments were fleeting. As the drums faded and the fires died down, the mantle of kingship settled once more upon his shoulders. To be a Zulu king was to live between worlds, forever balancing the needs of the living with the demands of the dead. It was a life of power and isolation, of divine connection and human loneliness. The true measure of a king was not in his conquests or his wealth, but in how he carried this sacred burden. For, in the end, he was more than a ruler. He was the living heart of his people, beaten in time with the rhythms of the universe. And so, as we leave this sacred hill, the echoes of drums still lingering in the air, we carry with us a glimpse of the profound mystery that was Zulu kingship, a mystery that continues to resonate even as the world changes around us, reminding us of the deep connections between the seen and unseen realms. In our next segment, we will step into the royal courts, where the sacred meets the political, and where the fate of nations is decided in whispers and gestures. We will see how alliances were forged and broken, how queens wielded influence from behind the scenes, and how the delicate balance of power was maintained in a world where every action had both earthly and spiritual consequences. Join us as we unravel the intricate tapestry of Zulu royal politics, where cattle were currency, marriages were alliances, and a single word could change the course of history. The story of the Zulu kingdom continues. A tale of power, spirituality, and the enduring strength of a people who lived with one foot in this world and one in the realm of spirits. Until next time, may the wisdom of the ancestors guide you, and may you find the sacred in the everyday. For in the end, are we not all kings and queens of our own destinies, each of us carrying the weight of our own crowns? Imagine this. Child of the Niter, great circle of beehive huts, woven from thatch and tradition, surrounded by tall palisades of sharpened wood, in its heart, the royal kraal of the Zulu king. Not a palace of stone, but a kingdom of order and whisper. This was no ordinary homestead. It breathed like a living thing, its rhythm dictated not by clocks, but by rituals and footsteps. Within it walked the real architects of royal power, the wives of the king. Zulu kings practiced polygamy not for pleasure, but for politics. Each wife came from a different powerful clan alliances, sealed not with treaties, but with bride price and sacred ceremony. The great wife, known as Inkuzikazi Inkulu, held the highest status. She was not merely a consort, she was a pillar of the nation. When she bore a son, that child was errandless, fate whispered otherwise. Below her stood the head wives of the left and right regiments, linked symbolically to the very layout of the Zulu military. Each controlled separate cattle, grain, and retainers. Their huts were guarded at night. Their influence stretched deep into village politics, and their rivalries were the stuff of firelight gossip. Let's pause here for a moment. The women sing lullabies to sleeping children, and the wind circles the kraal like a watchful spirit. Jealousy was both natural and deadly, for each wife knew to be favored today was not a guarantee of safety tomorrow. Poisoning was rare, but never impossible. Gossip could kill, as surely as a spear. A single whispered rumor that one wife had consulted a diviner to curse another could result in banishment, or worse, and so, beneath their beaded veils, the royal women wore masks of diplomacy. They rose before the sun to oversee brewing, to direct the grinding of maize, to tend to royal cattle. Their fingers worked, but their minds never rested. Among them were not just wives, but prophets and keepers of history. It was often a queen who remembereth exact wording of an ancestral curse, or the taboo that must not be broken this planting season. Even warriors, hardened in battle, sought the blessings of the Inkuzikazi before marching to war. And at royal funerals, it was the widows who keened the loudest, not only mourning the man, but guarding the spiritual door he was passing through. Let's pause again. The drums are quiet tonight, but the power of the matriarch still hums through the earth. Even young girls in the kraal played roles in this royal machine. Chosen for beauty, intelligence, or noble lineage, they were brought in as attendants trained in song, dance, and diplomacy. They learned how to brew the perfect calabash of They learned which ancestor received which offering. They learned how to smile without speaking, how to speak with devastating precision when needed. Some would grow to become wives, others confidants. A few power brokers in their own right, This was the world behind the king-woven knot of spears and battle cries, but of women's hands, women's secrets, and women's strength. A king without a strong Inkozakazi was like a kraal with no fence. Vulnerable, unfinished. Let's pause once more, my friend, for dawn will come soon, and in our next tale we'll peer into the halls of decision, where cattle were counted like votes, and where fate was often sealed with a nod, a glance, or the sip of warm beer. In the time of Shaka Zulu, the royal kraal pulsed with an energy unlike any before. The great king's ambition reshaped not just the land, but the very fabric of Zulu society. His mother, Nandi, once scorned and exiled, became a force to be reckoned with. Her influence stretched far beyond the kraal's boundaries, shaping the destiny of a nation. Imagine the whispers in the night, as Nandi's rivals plotted and schemed, the air thick with tension. Every gesture scrutinized for hidden meaning, but Shaka's reign brought changes to the royal wives' world. He discouraged marriage among his warriors, elevating the status of unmarried women in his service. These were the Ezegadla, the king's handmaidens and potential future wives. They lived in a separate section of the royal kraal, their lives dedicated to the service of the king. Some say it was Shaka's way of ensuring loyalty, others whisper of deeper motives. But in this new order, the traditional power of the royal wives was challenged. Yet even in times of change, some traditions held firm. The rituals of purification, the sacred dances performed only by royal women, the whispered prayers to ancestors long gone. In the cool of the evening, when the cattle lowed softly in their enclosures, the royal women gathered to share stories. Tales of battles won and lost, of omens seen in the flight of birds, of children born and dreams unfulfilled. These were not idle gossip, but the weaving of a living history. Each story a thread in the tapestry of the Zulu nation, preserved in the minds and hearts of its women. The royal kraal was more than a home. It was the beating heart of an empire, and within its walls, the women were its lifeblood. They were the keepers of tradition, the bridges between past and future. Their songs echoed through generations, their wisdom shaping the minds of future kings. In times of war, it was the royal women who prepared the warriors, blessing their spears with ancient chants, tying protective charms to their arms. And when the men marched away, it was the women who kept the kingdom running, managing resources, settling disputes, ensuring the survival of their people. The power of the royal wives was not in brute strength, but in subtle influence. A word here, a gesture there, shaping decisions that would echo through history. They were diplomats without title, negotiating alliances through marriages and friendships. Their networks stretched across clans and territories, a web of relationships as strong as any army. In the shadows of the great huts, deals were struck and promises made. The fate of nations decided not by the clash of spears, but by the quiet words of women. And so, as the night deepens and the fires burn low, we leave the royal kraal to its secrets. The women sleep, but their dreams are of power and responsibility. For tomorrow brings new challenges, new battles to be fought with words and wisdom. In the world of the Zulu elite, the royal wives were more than mere consorts. They were the unseen pillars of the kingdom, their strength as vital as any warrior's spear. As dawn breaks over the hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, the royal kraal stirs to life once more. The women rise, ready to face another day of intrigue and duty, for in their hands lies the true power of the Zulu kingdom, a power as enduring as the land itself. And so we end our tale, but the story of the royal wives continues. In every whispered secret, in every carefully chosen word, in every child born to carry on the legacy, the sun rises higher, casting long shadows across the kraal, and in those shadows, the women of the royal household continue their ancient dance of power and politics, for they know, as surely as the sun will set, that their actions today will shape the kingdom of tomorrow. And so, child of the night, remember this tale of the royal kraal, for in its twists and turns lies the true heart of power, not in the clash of spears or the roar of battle, but in the quiet strength of women, weaving the fabric of a nation with hands both gentle and strong. As we leave the royal kraal behind, its secrets safe within its wooden walls, we carry with us a deeper understanding of a world where power flows not just from the throne, but from the whispered conversations of women, from the lullabies sung to future kings, from the wisdom passed down through generations. This is the legacy of the royal wives, a legacy as enduring as the African sky above, as powerful as the rivers that carve the land, as essential as the very breath of the nation. And so our tale ends, but the story of the royal kraal lives on, in every beat of the drum, in every bead sewn into a royal garment, in every child who hears these words and remembers. For in remembering, we keep alive the spirit of those who came before, those who shaped a kingdom not just with spears and shields, but with wisdom, patience, and the quiet strength of women. Lean in closer, child of the stars, for our journey now takes us deeper into the realm of smoke and bone, where power whispers on the wind. Beyond the king's kraal and the wives' council, a deeper authority awaits, one that listens more than it speaks. These are the Isanusi, not witches, not prophets, but interpreters of the unseen world, chosen in fevered dreams, marked by illness or lightning's touch. They answer the insistent call of ancestors. Let us pause for a moment. A distant cow's bellow breaks the silence, as a shape moves through the mist, unseen but not unfelt. The diviner's power is not their own. They do not choose to lead. They are chosen by ancestors, by the spirits of the dead will walk beside the living still, to seek an Isanusis, to cross a sacred threshold from the mundane to the mystical. A farmer might ask why his cattle sicken. A wife might seek meaning in an elusive dream. A general might demand, will victory be ours in battle? And the diviner would kneel, scatter the bones, and read their fall like stars strewn across the earth. Yet in the royal kraal, diviners were more than healers or seers, for no Zulu ruler could ascend without the blessing of the spirit world. During a king's coronation, a diviner would guide him through purification, water cascading over his body, ash spread upon his brow, cattle slaughtered and blood spilled not for the people, but for the Amadlos either, ancestor. And when that same king's life ebbed, his spirit had to be bound, guided back to the ancestral realm lest it linger, angry and aimless. Let us pause here. Silence, blankets, the reed fields, as if even the wind holds its breath to listen. Rituals marked every season, every illness, every shift in the air. The new moon was greeted with praise. A child's first tooth celebrated in song. A chief's troubled dream could spark a day of cleansing. Even rain was a matter of politics. When skies remained stubbornly dry, diviners were consulted not as weathermen, but as spiritual negotiators. A sacrifice might follow. A calabash shattered. The people would wait, and when the first raindrop fell, the diviner would not smile. They would simply nod, as if confirming what the ancestors had already decreed. Kings, for all their spears and servants, feared the diviner's tongue. A whispered warning from an Isanusi cold: unravel alliances, postpone wars, or cast suspicion on a loyal brother. Diviners were never harmed even in betrayal. Their protection came from beyond. It was said that a man who spilled a diviner's blood would not live to see his cattle calve. His lineage would wither like scorched sorghum, so they walked the kraal freely, unarmored but untouchable, spoken of in hushed tones, respected, feared. Let us pause here for a breath. Night has thickened, and the fire casts only shadows now. In that realm of the invisible, royal rituals drew their power. The festival of Umkosi Wakwishwama, the first fruits ceremony, was not merely a feast, it was a spiritual reckoning. The king, encircled by warriors and elders, would partake of the season's first meal, but only after it was blessed by the diviner and offered to the spirits. None could taste the harvest until this act was complete. It was not mere respect, it was balance. Without it, the year would twist. Crops might wither, war might erupt, ancestors might turn away. These were not just traditions, they were architecture in visible bones, holding up the body of the nation, and the diviner, they were its very heartbeat. Let us pause here for a moment. You can almost hear the rattle of bones on woven mat, and the deep hum of a voice speaking not to you, but to those who came before. In the time of Shaka Zulu, the power of diviners reached new heights. The great king, known for his military prowess, was equally attuned to the spiritual realm. It is said that before each battle, Shaka would consult his most trusted eye. The diviner would cast the bones, interpret the patterns, and whisper strategies that seemed to come from beyond the veil. Shaka's faith in these spiritual advisors was so strong that he often based crucial military decisions on their counsel. Some say it was this blend of physical might and mystical insight made him nearly invincible. But even Shaka, the lion of the Zulu, was not above the power of the diviners. When drought struck the land and crops withered in the fields, it was to the Izanusi that he turned. They led him through complex rituals, calling upon the ancestors to open the skies. For days, the king would seclude himself, following the diviner's instructions to the letter. And when the rains finally came, it was the Isanusi who received the praise and art of the king. Let us pause here. The air grows thick with the scent of herbs, and somewhere in the distance, a drum begins to beat. In matters of succession, the diviner's role was paramount. When Shaka's half-brother Dingan plotted to seize the throne, it was said that he first sought blessing of a powerful ice. The diviner, caught between loyalty and destiny, cast the bones in secret. What was revealed in that shadowy hut, only the spirits know. But soon after, Shaka fell to an assassin's spear, and Dingan ascended. Yet the new king found that the diviner's power was a double-edged blade. The same spiritual advisors who had supported his Rizino held him accountable to the ancestors' will. Every decision, every campaign, every alliance formed or broken had to pass through their discerning gaze. Let us pause once more. The night grows deeper, and the stars above seem to pulse with ancient, unspoken wisdom. In times of peace and in war, the Isanusi were the thread that connected the mortal world to the realm of spirits. When a great battle loomed, it was the diviner who prepared the army. Warriors would be anointed with special herbs, their spears blessed, their shields empowered. The night before conflict, an Isanusi would lead the soldiers in a ritual dance, calling upon the strength of fallen heroes to fill their hearts and guide their hands. And after the battle, whether in victory or defeat, it was the diviner who performed the cleansing rites. For the spirits of the slain could linger on the battlefield, bringing misfortune to the living. In the intricate tapestry of Zulu society, the Isanusi were the weavers of fate. Their wisdom, passed down through generations, helped maintain the delicate balance between the seen and unseen worlds. From the humblest farmer to the mightiest king, all recognized their authority. For in a world where ancestors walked among the living, and spirits whispered on the wind, The diviner was the bridge between realms. Let us pause here one last time. The fire has burned low, and the night presses close. Can you hear it? The soft rattle of bones, the whispered secrets of the ages, the breath of those who came before. In the world of the Zulu, power was not just held in spears or cattle. It flowed through the hands of the Ezenusi, channeled from the vast, unseen realm beyond. And as we sit here, in the flickering shadows of history, we are reminded that true authority often lies, not in what can be seen, but in what can be felt, sensed, and believed. When next we gather, we'll step into the chambers of kings, where cattle were currency, and silence often spoke louder than law. But for now, let the whispers of the diviner Seho in your dreams, a reminder of the invisible threads that bind us all to the great tapestry of existence. As we return to the royal homestead, we do not enter through the wide gates, but slit in gently like the dusk wind where the drums have stilled, but the minds remain awake. Here we step into a realm not of warriors or rituals, but of calculated silence, polygamous politics, and whispered decisions made before dawn. The Zulu palace was not a European castle, but a living, breathing organism. It breathed through its courtyards, listened through its thatched huts, and saw through the eyes of those who watched, but never spoke. At the center was the king, but orbiting him were wives, sisters, uncles, cousins, servants, who served more than food, they served strategy. Let's pause here for a moment. There's a kettle steaming on the embers, and soft footsteps in the grass behind us. Polygamy was not merely desire, it was diplomacy. A king's wives often came from rival clans. To marry their daughters was to claim alliance. To neglect them was to risk war. The great wife held rank above the rest, often from a prestigious family, and the only one whose son might inherit the throne, but this did not mean harmony. Jealousy brewed in the shadows. Favors were counted. Gifts tallied. A glance at the wrong time could shift one's future. The king's meals were not simple affairs. Every dish tasted by a taster. Every clay pot inspected for cracks. The food, a theater of loyalty. And as he ate, he watched. Not just the performance of the dancers, but the posture of his commanders, the silence of his scribes, the flicker of the torches revealing too much in someone's face. This was the true court, not the songs or salutes, but the space between words. Let's pause here. The wind passes through the reeds like a sigh, and the fire bends low. Listening, children were raised not by mothers alone, but by selected attendants, taught royal codes, manners, and how to carry secrets like feathers on the tongue. Boys trained in war, but more importantly, in restraint. The most dangerous prince was not the loudest, but the one who smiled and said little. And daughters, they were educated in courtship and courtesy, but also in lineage, and the delicate art of knowing when to speak and when not to. The royal crow was not just a place, it was a machine, well-oiled with fear, discipline, spiritual grounding, and absolute order. Visitors, whether foreign envoys or local chiefs, were watched. What gifts did they bring? Who did they glance at first? What proverb did they quote during the meal? Everything mattered, even dreams. If shared, could be interpreted as messages. A warrior's bad dream might cancel a campaign. A wife's dream might change inheritance. Let's pause here for a breath. The moon is high now, and even the cattle seemed to sleep with one eye open. There were no mirrors in the palace, yet every man was reflected in the way he stood, spoke, and left a room. Loyalty wasn't proven once, it was performed daily. And betrayal, it never came loudly. It was a missed greeting, a forgotten proverb, an absence from a ritual. By the time it was named, it was already punished. And so the world of Zulu rulers though gilded in cows and copper, was also laced with unease. Not fear, but a discipline so deep it became second nature. Here, silence was louder than speech, ritual more binding than law. And real power was never raised, only understood. Let's pause here for a final moment. The fire is now embers. The kraal lies still, and the hills cradle us like tired arms. In the final chapter, we shall draw back from the details and drift gently into reflection. A soft farewell to this world of spears, silence, and stars. As we step back from the intricate tapestry of Zulu royal life, we find ourselves in a world both familiar and alien. A world where power flowed not through written decrees, but through the subtle currents of human interaction. The legacy of Shaka Zulu looms large over this landscape. His military genius reshaped the political map of southern Africa. But it was his innovations in governance that truly cemented the Zulu kingdom's place in history. Shaka understood that true power lay not just in conquest, but in the ability to maintain order and loyalty. He instituted a system of age regiments that bound young men to the state, creating a pool of warriors and laborers that could be called upon at will. But Shaka's brilliance extended beyond the battlefield. He recognized the power of symbolism and ritual in maintaining his authority. The royal hunt, the first fruits ceremony, the distribution of cattle, these were carefully choreographed displays of royal power and generosity. Yet for all his innovations, Shaka was still bound by the traditions and expectations of Zulu society. He, too, had to navigate the complex web of relationships within the royal household, balancing the demands of his wives, advisors, and potential rivals. This delicate balance was not unique to Shaka's reign. It was a constant feature of Zulu royal life, persisting long after his death. Each successive king had to master this intricate dance of power and diplomacy, lest they fall victim to the very forces they sought to control. The royal kraal, with its circular arrangement of huts, was a physical manifestation of this political reality. At its center stood the king's residence, surrounded by the dwellings of his wives, advisors, and guards. This layout was not just practical, it was symbolic, a daily reminder of the king's central role in Zulu society. But the true heart of the royal kraal was not visible to the casual observer. It lay in the whispered conversations, the meaningful glances, the subtle shifts in posture that signaled alliances formed and broken. Here, in the shadowy world of court politics, we find echoes of royal courts across time and space. The intrigues of the Zulu palace would not have been out of place in the courts of medieval Europe or imperial China, yet there were aspects of Zulu royal life that were uniquely African. The spiritual dimension, for instance, played a crucial role. The king was not just a political leader, but a link between the living and the dead, the earthly and the divine. This spiritual authority was reinforced through ritual and ceremony. The annual first fruits ceremony, for example, was not just a harvest festival. It was a renewal of the king's spiritual power, a reaffirmation of his right to rule. But with great power came great danger. The king's elevated status made him a target for both earthly and supernatural threats. Poison was a constant fear, as were curses and evil spirits. To combat these dangers, the king relied on a complex system of protective measures. Food tasters, as we've mentioned, were just the beginning. The king's person was surrounded by a web of taboos and rituals designed to ward off harm. Even the king's bodily fluids were carefully disposed of, lest they fall into the hands of those who might use them for nefarious purposes. In this world, even the most mundane aspects of daily life took on profound significance. As we draw our exploration to a close, we're left with a sense of the immense complexity of Zulu royal life. It was a world of stark contrasts, of public displays of power and private moments of vulnerability, of rigid hierarchy and fluid alliances, of military might and subtle diplomacy. The Zulu kingdom, at its height, was a formidable political entity. Its influence stretched far beyond its immediate borders, shaping the destiny of southern Africa for generations to come. Yet for all its power, the Zulu kingdom was not immune to the winds of change. The arrival of European colonizers would bring new challenges, forcing the Zulu rulers to adapt their strategies to a rapidly changing world. But that is a story for another time. For now, let us linger a moment longer in this world of spears and secrets, of cattle and kings. A world where power was measured not just in land and wealth, but in the ability to navigate the treacherous waters of court politics. As the last embers of our fire fade, and the stars wheel overhead, we bid farewell to the royal crown. Its secrets may be lost to time, but its legacy lives, and a testament to the enduring power of African ingenuity and state. And so we leave, carrying with us the echoes of drums, the whisper of reeds, and the weight of unspoken words. The Zulu royal court, in all its complexity and contradiction, remains a fascinating chapter in the grand narrative of human civilization. And now, as the sun dips below the horizon, we gather the threads of our tale and lay them gently upon the African soil. We have journeyed through the heart of a continent, felt the pulse of ancient kingdoms, and heard the whispers of forgotten empires. We've walked in the footsteps of great leaders and humble warriors, each step echoing through the corridors of time. We rose with the dawn, alongside the silent armies of the Zulu. We watched as they forged their bodies into living weapons, their discipline as unyielding as the African sun. We witnessed the birth of a nation, not in the halls of power, but on the dusty plains where courage met destiny. Shaka Zulu emerged, not as a myth, but as a man of flesh and blood, shaped by exile, tempered by adversity. He was a visionary who saw beyond the horizon. With nothing but his will and the edge of an assegai, he carved an empire from the wilderness. Yet, like so many great leaders, his greatest enemy lay within his own heart. Let us pause for a moment. The embers of our campfire glow softly, and the vast African sky stretches above us, a silent witness to our tale. We stood on the blood-soaked fields of Isandwana, where the tide of history turned. Here, the might of an empire met its match, not in numbers or technology, but in the indomitable spirit of a people fighting for their land. We watched as young warriors, armed with little more than courage and conviction, faced down the thunder of British rifles. In the quiet corners of royal kraals, we discovered the true nature of power. Here, beneath thatched roofs and behind woven screens, we found the beating heart of nations. Wives who held secrets like precious gems, diviners who read the future in scattered bones, and leaders who wielded silence more effectively than any weapon. The world of pre-colonial Africa was a tapestry of complexity. It was harsh, yes, with laws etched in stone and tradition, but it was also a place of profound beauty, like the rugged majesty of mountains. Not soft or gentle, but awe-inspiring in its strength, and the deep wells of meaning hidden within its silences. You have walked with us now through the mists of time. Perhaps your eyes are heavy, your mind drifting like smoke on the evening breeze. Or perhaps you're wide awake, your imagination aflame with visions of a world long past, but never truly gone. Let us rest here for a moment. The fire has burned low, and even the spirits of the ancestors have retreated to their eternal slumber. As we prepare to leave this journey, we carry with us the taste of wood smoke, the scent of sun-baked earth, and the glitter of countless stars. We leave behind the warrior's camp, the intrigue of royal courts, the thunder of battles, and the whispers of spirit worlds. Yet they remain etched into the very bones of the land. carried in the memories of those who came after, and woven into the fabric of songs still sung around flickering fires, wherever you find yourself now, in the comfort of your home, in the restless wanderings of your heart, or on the misty edges of a dream. Know that the past is not a distant land. It speaks to us still, in the rustle of grass, in the rhythm of drums, in the footsteps that echo through time, as we bid farewell to the great kingdoms of Africa, to the warriors and visionaries who shaped a continent. Remember that their legacy lives on, in the proud stance of their descendants, in the stories passed down through generations, and in the very soil beneath our feet. Good night, dear listener. May your dreams be filled with the wisdom of ancient kings, the courage of forgotten heroes, and the magic of a land that time could never truly tame. Rest well beneath the vast African sky, where the stars still shine as brightly as they did in ages past. We'll meet again, perhaps under the spreading branches of a baobab tree, to share more tales of this magnificent continent and its people. Until then, may the spirits of Africa guide your path and keep your heart full of wonder.